Hey folks, Kevin Scholla here, host of the Palin Update on SaraNet Radio. And in case you missed it, we had the opportunity to participate in Grizzly Fest last month, the online winter summit, and yours truly had the chance to interview Peter Schweizer. Here is my talk with Peter from Grizzly Fest.
Well, hey, it's an honor, really, to be on here with you, Kevin, and I'm just delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know many people were shocked to hear just how bad corruption in Congress really is and how deep it runs. I think they had an idea, but it was just how deep it runs that got a lot of people's attention. How did you find out members of Congress are exempt from insider trading rules? And when you discovered this, were you shocked?
I was shocked, yeah. I mean, I discovered this because a friend of mine had sent me a report in this academic journal, the Journal of Quantitative Economics, and it was this study. It looked at 6,000 stock trades by U.S. senators, and what it showed is that senators had a much higher rate of return on their stock investments than even hedge funds. And so I was left with this question, Kevin, of, how do they do this? Is it that we don't appreciate how brilliant these people are? Or is it the more likely answer that something else is going on here? And that something else was that, they're making these huge decisions related to healthcare, the auto industry, defense companies, and they're trading stocks based on that information. And when I looked and discovered that insider trading rules really didn't apply to them, I was absolutely stunned. And when I shared that with friends that are, in the financial industry or look at and understand politics, they were equally stunned too. And this is kind of the inherent problem that, Governor Palin has talked about and so many in the Tea Party are concerned about, which is the fact that when the rule makers get to write the rules, they try to figure out ways where they can exempt themselves and their friends. And this is the problem we have when we get concentrated power in Washington.
So while people are supposed to go to Congress to serve their constituents, you point out in the book that too many are really just there to get rich. That's scary, isn't it?
It is. It's very scary. I mean, if you look at a lot of state legislators, I'm in Florida. I know, Texas is similar. I mean, we have part-time legislators. There's a certain time that they have the session, unless there's an emergency. They come in, they do their business, and go. And, Washington, D.C., it used to be the same way in Congress and in the Senate. People would come for short terms. They might stay for 8 years, say if they were in the House, or 12 years in the Senate, and they would go back to their regular jobs. Well, really, beginning with the progressives in the beginning of the 20th century, being in politics, being a politician, really became a career path. And they figured that rather than giving up their ability to accumulate wealth, they were going to use their political offices to do good and to do well at the same time. So we have a system in Washington. It includes both political parties, whereby they have a system that allows them to have the political power and the benefit that comes from being a member of Congress, while at the same time they have special methods that they can use to enrich themselves. And it's really quite sad and shocking at the same time.
The fact that these members of Congress are making all this money is one thing, but what really has people up in arms is that all of this, the sweetheart deals, insider trading, it's technically legal, if you want to put that in quotes, but legal.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, and the thing is that we think of, graft and dishonesty in Congress in the traditional ways. Somebody's going to bribe you, they're going to bring a shoebox into your office and offer you $20,000 in small bills. Right. And, that probably still does go on, but there's so many more efficient ways and more profitable ways that they can do it legally. So, if you instead go into a senator's office, don't bring a shoebox and cash, but you go instead and say, look, I have this access to these shares of stock. This company is going to go public. They're going to have this IPO or initial public offering of stock. And, Senator, I'm going to give you 5,000 shares, and you're going to be able to get these for like $10 a share. And when it goes public the next day, they're going to be worth $50 a share. That's a far more profitable way than taking a direct cash bribe, and it's also legal, and it goes on all the time. So they come up with all these techniques that really for the rest of us would be graft, it would be illegal, and we would end up in jail. But they figured out legal ways to enrich themselves that frankly shouldn't be legal at all.
So it's all just a huge double standard. Congress members can do things that if you or I took part in the same practices, we could go to jail.
That's right, and I think really the true heart and message of the Tea Party that I think is so powerful, and so true is that we want to look at an issue like this. A lot of Americans do, and think, well, this is a problem with a few corrupt individuals. It's really a much deeper problem than that. This is a compromised system. And it's a compromised system because we have concentrated so much power in Washington. Washington has become so big. There's so much money at stake that, yes, there are some honest people in Washington, but the system is constantly tugging at those people, too, encouraging them to self-enrich and to engage in crony capitalism. So the problem is not just a few corrupt people from one party to the other. The problem is the inherent system of big government we have in Washington, and that's why I think the Tea Party message is so, so important.
How much money are we talking about here? How much do congressional members make through insider trading?
Well, it varies. We know, for example, during the health care debate, Obamacare in 2009, you had people like Senator John Kerry or Congressman Jared Polis from Colorado that were literally making multi-million-dollar bets on health care companies. At the same time that they were, pushing legislation through a committee or adding an amendment or right before a crucial vote, they knew how it was going to come down. They were literally making multi-million-dollar bets. So Jared Polis bought between $7 and $35 million stake in a medical tourism company during a crucial vote, and he's made a lot of money in that deal. We don't know exactly how much, but literally millions of dollars. And we know that John Kerry had capital gains of several $million on his health care trades as well. So this is a large amount of money. Some members of Congress, of course, don't have that much money, but, they're shaving corners and they're engaging in insider trading, and they're making, an extra $50, $60, maybe $100,000 a year, which is still a lot of money. But the problem is just the inherent nature. I mean, I think whether insiders are making $10 million or $10,000, it's equally wrong. Whether you rob a bank for $10 million or $10,000, it's still a felony, and I think you ought to go to jail for either one.
And certainly not what your average American wants to hear when people are having trouble, just balancing their monthly budgets and dealing with their household expenses, and they see what's going on in Congress with all of this nonsense. Governor Palin, as you mentioned, has pounded away at crony capitalism, and I guess this free pass for Congress really brings the problem to light for others to at least see what's happening and hopefully start to put an end to it.
Well, that's right. This was part of what she did when she was governor in Alaska. I mean, there was a crony network, an old boy network there that she took on, people that were enriching themselves. She took them on and broke the back of crony capitalism. We need to do the same thing on the national level. They have now passed in both the House and the Senate something called the Stock Act. It's a law that makes it a crime to engage in insider trading, congressional insider trading. The problem is it's a weak bill. We need to do a whole lot more. There's a great congressman from Wisconsin, Congressman Sean Duffy, came in 2010, Republican from Wisconsin, supported by the Tea Party. He's introduced something called the Restrict Act, which would require mandatory blind trusts and a lot more immediate disclosure of financial transactions. We need to be supporting those efforts. They're hoping that with this bill that has gone through, that they'll put sort of window dressing on the problem, and the problem will go away. But we've got to hold their feet to the fire and continue to insist on these changes. Because I'll tell you, Kevin, if we can't get them to stop engaging in insider trading and stop enriching themselves with our money, how on earth are we going to get them to tackle far more difficult and complex issues like entitlements, like Social Security and welfare reform?
So the Stock Act, as currently constituted, not enough?
No, it's not enough, because here's the problem. That it makes it illegal to engage in insider trading by a congressman, but it requires enforcement from the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the SEC is not going to go after a powerful member of Congress. This is the inherent nature of the problem when you concentrate so much power in the hands of the few. Even if you pass a law, you're going to have law enforcement agencies afraid to enforce it. And what I would ask people to do is look at the experience that the FBI had back in 2006. You may remember, Kevin, the congressman who had the $90,000 of cash in his freezer, Congressman William Jefferson. Yeah, he was taking bribes. The FBI heard about it on a wiretap, so they got a federal judge to give them a search warrant to go search his office. What? That all sounds good and fair. They went and did that. Congress went absolutely ballistic. They said that this was an abridgment of congressional authority. This was an outrage, and there were actually threats to cut the FBI budget, if you can believe it, based on that. So the SEC is not going to enforce that. Instead of passing a law like this, we also need to put in real specific guidelines that absolutely say what they have to do. And that means mandatory blind trust. I think we should also say, if you're on, say, the Senate Banking Committee, there is no reason why a senator sitting on that committee should be allowed to trade bank stocks. You know, we don't let judges trade stocks or own stocks in cases which they're hearing. We don't let people in the executive branch trade stocks in an area of their responsibility. So why on earth do we allow congressmen and their staffers to do so? It's to me just an outrage that we allow that to happen.
You can understand why people on Main Street are outraged, many at least. You said, from as least sophisticated as the money stuffed away in the freezer to these sophisticated deals we're seeing that are technically legal. So tough all around. I know one of the most appalling examples, if you will, of the politically connected making off like bandits was Obama buddy Warren Buffett, who you point out in the book made billions from TARP and the stimulus by front-running government action with his own investments. What can be done about that, and what do you make of the president now using Buffett as an example for why we must raise taxes on job creators?
Yeah, this is just an outrage, Kevin, because what you have is a situation where inside billionaires, whether it's Warren Buffett, whether it's George Soros or others, I talk about in my book, and you can see, news accounts out there in the media, these are individuals who are giving advice, I'll put that in quotation marks, to the president and to senior political officials. And they're sort of posing as kind of, well, we just want to kind of help the country. Well, that's fine if they're not trading stocks at the same time, but what they do is they give advice, they push a reform, and they help design a reform that, say, the Treasury Department will engage in. But before that becomes known to the public, they buy a bunch of stocks in those areas and then cash in when the rest of the world finds out about that policy or that reform. I think we need to have a very, very clear-cut policy that when a president is talking to people and getting advice, there needs to be transparency. We have things like the Freedom of Information Act that apply certainly to all sorts of communications that the White House engages in. I think when you're talking about billionaire investors who have large investment stakes in industries that are highly regulated and do a lot of business with the government, if they're giving advice, we ought to know about it. Because here's the cold hard fact, Kevin. If Warren Buffett were doing this with another company, he were advising a company on a leveraged buyout or a merger, and he were doing so quietly, and then he were buying stock in the company that was going to benefit from the action that he was advising, that's insider trading. I mean, he would be prosecuted by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But because it involves our money and the federal government, he's free to do so. And that's just a double standard that needs to end. And this, I think, is the reason we see more and more billionaires embrace, sort of liberal left-wing causes and become more politically active, because they may believe it, but they also know that it's very, very profitable, because if they can get the government and steer in a direction they want, it's a great way to cash in and make even more money.
So Martha Stewart was sent to jail a while back there. So you're telling me if she was a senator, instead of dealing with napkins and place settings and whatnot, she might have been okay doing what she was doing too?
Yeah, I mean, that's the outrageous thing. I mean, if you look at the list of people that have faced prosecution for insider trading, these can include secretaries at investment firms. There was even a reporter for the Wall Street Journal a few years back who ended up going to jail for 13 months and paying a large fine because he was telling friends what was going to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal the next day, and that, of course, affects stock prices. And he made like $30,000 doing this. Well, they threw the book at him, and he spent more than a year in jail. So a Wall Street Journal reporter tells friends what's on the front page of the newspaper, goes to jail. But a United States senator introduces an amendment on a health care bill and then buys a bunch of stocks in the company that's going to be affected by that amendment. That's okay? That's outrageous, and that sort of practice needs to end. And only if we hold their feet to the fire is that change going to take place. Because I've had numerous conversations with members of Congress who have watched the Stock Act, voted on and pushed through, and each one of them, both on the Senate side and the House side, have told me very, very clearly, nobody wants to vote for this, but they have to vote for it because people are very upset. So they are doing this kicking and screaming, and that is because of ultimately the pressure on the Tea Party. And the one example I would give here, there are many others, Congressman Spencer Backus, who's a Republican from Alabama, who is, doing options trading during the financial crisis, using inside information. He is having to step down as the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. He has primary challenges now in his district. He's under investigation by the Congressional Ethics Committee. That is all a result, not of my book, not of 60 Minutes. It's a result of the fact that Tea Party members in Birmingham, Alabama, went out and have protested in front of his office and have kept that issue alive. And it has forced reform, and it is literally scaring everybody else because Spencer Backus is a very powerful member of Congress, and the voters have put him and everybody else on notice. So this is a victory, one in what I hope will be a lot of victories for the Tea Party, and I say, God bless it and keep it up.
Yeah, we're interviewing one of his opponents, Scott Beeson, later today, so glad you could touch on the Backus situation. Since the book's been out, Peter, we know there's more awareness, certainly. Any other positives that have come from it that you've noticed?
Well, I've noticed a couple of things. Number one, it's one of these issues, and I think there are several others, that you get support not just from the Tea Party. They sort of form the core support, but a lot of people that aren't necessarily political or consider themselves independents and they don't particularly have one philosophical view or the other. It's getting them to take notice to the fact that, people that advocate for larger government, people that come out and spite, say that their motives, for example, in taking control of 20% of the U.S. economy by effectively nationalizing health care, they're coming to realize that this is not so much about ideas and helping people, that there's a huge component of people wanting to and getting rich by growing and expanding government. So I'm very encouraged because, honestly, I have had no one, and I've done a lot of talk radio, everything from NPR to conservative shows. I've done a lot of interviews with newspapers and speeches. I've not had one person come up to me and say they don't have a problem with this. Or I haven't had one person come up and actually defend what's going on. And so I think it's creating an opportunity for the Tea Party and for people in general who want to clean up Washington and limit the size and scope of government to really inform and educate people and say, hey, look, there's a whole business side to this. Follow the money, and you're going to realize that a lot of the ideas that are being pushed by Obama and his supporters have a lot less to do with helping people, a lot less to do with their belief system, and has a whole lot more with them finding out ways to enrich themselves and their friends. So I'm very encouraged by that.
And what else do we need to do to defeat the crony capitalism you uncovered? I know Governor Palin, as we mentioned, she keeps hammering away, and some people didn't even know the phrase or what it meant. So the fact that it's out there and people like Governor Palin keep talking about it, I'm sure is a great thing. Is there anything folks can do other than voting these people out and just speaking to others and making sure, I guess, that neighbors and friends know exactly just how corrupt things are in D.C.?
Yeah, I would say all of those things. The other thing they can do is they can actually investigate their political officials and leaders. I didn't get a chance to look at every member of Congress. You can go to a website called opensecrets.org. It's not a website that I run, but opensecrets.org, and you can look under personal finances, and you can actually pull up the financial disclosure that your congressman or senator makes. And what I would encourage people to do is look at the stock trades and look at the land deals that they engage in, and then look at their committee assignments. And if they're on, say, the Senate Armed Services Committee and they're trading a lot of defense stock, start to investigate and find out what was going on in that committee. You can get a lot of that information online and see how it corresponds with their stock trades. I think you'll find that more often than not there's a connection, and then hold people into account. Hold your member of Congress into account. This is an issue that scares them in a major way, and it's a real opportunity, I think, for people to take back and to put Washington on notice that they're not going to tolerate this kind of stuff.
And I guess the old saying, they have to remember that they work for us, not the other way around, right?
That's exactly right. Now, I'll tell you this. A very powerful member of the Senate, chairman of a very powerful committee. When the book was out, I met him in the green room at Fox News as we were getting ready to go on shows. We didn't know each other. He introduced himself. I mentioned who I was. There was a very long pause. And then it was interesting, Kevin. He spent the next 5 to 7 minutes trying to convince me that, when it came to his stock portfolio, it had done really bad over the last 20 years. And when it came to his real estate deals, he'd been really, really horrible. And when I left, I came to realize, I'm just sort of a writer. This is one of the most powerful people in Washington, but this kind of transparency scares them. It really scares them. So take note. You are exactly right. They work for us. The power is in our hands, and truth is a very, very powerful weapon that we have in our arsenal.
No, he wanted your blessing there, you see. He knows that you're an authority on the subject, and it certainly is, and it has been great. I know that so many folks have come up to me, and I've heard it through others, that, just had no idea. Everyone says, oh, this and that about D.C., but when you hear specifics, I think a great point you made just a little bit ago, Peter, is about how you've had people from all areas, from the left to the right to the middle, and I think, is that because we're talking about people's wallets and people's checkbooks? Is that when people say, oh, wait a minute, politics aside here, that's not right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that because, and I think it's an important battle to have, don't get me wrong. I mean, I have very strong philosophical views about limited government and the American founding, but people, I think, are so familiar with the sort of ideological debate that they often tune it out. And so I think when we can show that we're not talking about ideology here, we're talking about people who are enriching themselves using our money in very creative ways to get rich and to get their buddies rich, that introduces to them a whole new universe of really what's going on in D.C. And I think we need to do more of that because people need to know what the different ideas are, but I think we need to take it to a much more practical realm so that they can understand and see, the motives of people who are pushing these programs is not to help the poor and to help the middle class, and it's not just about their belief system. It's about an opportunity to make money. There's a business plan behind all of this.
Well, Peter, I know you'll continue to keep them accountable. I know I'll do my best, and we certainly know Governor Palin continues to fight the great fight here. We are almost out of time, but Peter, thank you so much. A great conversation, and we'll kick it back to Nicole right now for some final thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin and Peter. That was just fascinating. And anyone out there who hasn't read the book, you need to go out there and get it. It's really the Bible, as far as I'm concerned, for what we need to do. You have a great chapter at the end, Peter, on some of the concrete steps, the laws that need to be passed, and just the the pressure that needs to be put on the institution of Congress and all their little pals. So Kevin Scholla of SarahNet Radio, great interview, and thanks to Peter Schweizer, author of Throw Them All Out. Grizzly Fest continues at the bottom of the hour. After this break, Professor Luigi Zingales is up next.
Well, there you have it. Thanks so much to Peter, and also thanks to Nicole Coulter and everyone at Grizzly Fest. During the first Grizzly Fest in 2011, I was a guest. This time around, I got to conduct an interview. Anyway, you slice it, quite an honor. For more on Grizzly Fest, check out grizzlyfest.com. I'm Kevin Scholla, and this is SarahNet Radio. Have a pleasant day.